Good morning. Today we look at Acts chapter 25, and here Paul appeals to Caesar. Paul, as a Roman citizen, had quite a few rights and also protections in place, um, and he used that status, that Roman citizenship, to his advantage several times, as we've kind of read a little bit already. But his citizenship made people take notice. They realized that, he couldn't be crucified, he couldn't be killed without a fair trial, and he had that right to appeal to Caesar, to have a trial before the Roman, uh, government's highest official, regardless. Um, we don't know how Paul gained his Roman citizenship. You could become a Roman citizen by, being born of a Roman parent, by retiring from the Roman military, but purchasing it, as the one, we read about that not so long ago, that the one, a jailer or someone had purchased his Roman citizenship. But there were also responsibilities of being a Roman citizen. You had to pay taxes, and you could, property taxes, municipal taxes, support the government. You could vote. You could go to Rome to vote on issues and stuff. But one of the big things was to be guaranteed this fair trial and protected against those certain forms of harsh punishment, as I mentioned, and to be beaten, to be flogged, as, not so long ago, as Paul was going to be flogged, he asked that question, are you going to flog a Roman citizen without, having been condemned for something? So there were a lot of rights that way and protections built in. And Paul used those to his advantage. And by using those, he brought the word of Jesus Christ to these Roman officials, to, many Gentiles in different lands and a lot of different places that way. And so, like, with Festus, with Felix, when he's first arrested, Felix was there, and Paul was in prison for 2 years, and then Felix wasn't very well liked by the Jews, and so he was removed, and then this Festus came in. And when Festus came into power, as we begin chapter 5, he knew that Felix had been on the outs with the Jewish population. So Festus goes to Jerusalem, and he spends time there. He went to the high priest and the chief, and these people talked to him, and of course they ask him, bring Paul back here and let us put him on trial, and but again they had this ambush set in place. There was still, they still wanted to kill him and get him out of the way. But Festus' answer to them was that Paul should be kept at Caesarea, and that he himself, this new governor Festus, would be going to Caesarea, and so he says, have some of your authorities, some of your leaders come, so that you may accuse this man, and we'll see. We'll give him a trial and see if there's any fault with this man. And so he'd been in Jerusalem for about 10 days, and then he went down to Caesarea, and he was, sitting on the judgment seat, ready to hold court. And the Jews were there, and so Festus commands Paul to be brought in. And the Jews then, it says, laid many serious complaints against Paul, which they could not prove. And while he answered for himself, neither against the laws of the Jews, nor against the temple, nor against Caesar have I offended in anything at all. And Festus then, trying to get in good with the Jews, asks Paul, well, are you willing to go to Jerusalem, back into the home country of the power center of the Jews, and be judged there concerning these things? So Paul's answer, I stand at Caesar's judgment where I ought to be judged. To the Jews I've done nothing wrong, as you very well know. For if I am an offender, if I've committed anything deserving of death, I don't object to dying. But he says there's nothing of which these men accuse me, that they can, that they can prove anything against me that I would be deserving of death. So I therefore appeal to Caesar. And so, as this Roman citizen, this is his right to demand a trial before Caesar himself. And so Festus, all right, you appeal to Caesar, then you're going to go. And several days before they sent Paul off then to Caesar, this King Agrippa and his wife Bernice come and to greet Festus, and they were there for quite a few days, and Festus talks to them, this King Agrippa and Beatrice, who I don't really know an awful lot about, I don't think. At least nothing comes to my mind. But he's a king. He's got some power, he's got some authority, and he commands some respect. And so Festus asks them, he says, there's a certain man left a prisoner by Felix, and these chief priests and elders of the Jews informed me when I was in Jerusalem, to ask a judgment against this Paul. And now he appealed to Caesar. So what am I supposed to do? He tells King Agrippa and Bernice, some of what these Jewish charges against him were. And he says, they question him about their own religion and about a certain Jesus who had died, who Paul affirmed was alive. So it's just, you can understand the confusion and all of that. And then Festus says, because I was uncertain of such questions, I asked whether he was willing to go to Jerusalem and be judged, but he appealed to Caesar. And so Agrippa says, yeah, I'd like to have some conversation with this man myself. So, just these new beliefs, this believing in the resurrected Jesus, this was something new, something different. And so here even King Agrippa wanted to know about that and have a conversation with Paul. And so as I mentioned, with Paul being this Roman citizen, here's one of his opportunities to present the gospel to a very high-ranking official. So it says the next day in verse 23, when Agrippa and Bernice had come with great pomp, lots of ceremony, lots of whoop-de-doo stuff, and entered the auditorium, they bring Paul in. And verse 24, Festus said, King Agrippa, and all the men who are here present, you see this man about whom the whole assembly petitioned me, both at Jerusalem and here, crying out that he was not fit to live any longer. These Jewish people were so upset with Paul and with his preaching, not only with his preaching, but the biggest thing was that so many people believed and heard and became committed to believing and trusting in the risen Lord and Jesus. And verse 25, Festus says, I found he had committed nothing deserving of death, and that he himself appealed to Augustus. I decided to send him. And he says, I have nothing certain to write to my Lord concerning him, so I would ask your help. And so when someone was appealed to Caesar and was going to be sent to Caesar, they had to have a letter accompanying them to explain, this is what's going on, so that the Caesar just he had information, he had the case against the person, and so this chapter ends with Festus saying, it did not seem, or it seems unreasonable to send a prisoner and not specify the charges against him. So this was one of the duties then of Festus as this leader of this region, that as he was going to send Paul, he had to have written charges. He had to have something in paper, in writing, some kind of proof maybe, or anyway an explanation. So he gets that he asks King Agrippa for assistance in that. And it's, so again, this citizenship, being a Roman citizen, has come into play again for Paul, giving him an awful lot of opportunity to witness to Jesus Christ.